Well, hello, folks. Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and these are the original teachings of Yeshua in the correct chronological order. You won't hear this anywhere else. You haven't heard it for 2,000 years. Only here, and we're bringing it to you wall to wall and treetop tall. You don't want to miss any of these videos. You don't want to miss any of these updates. So while you're here, like this channel, give me a thumbs up on this video. Those do help drive my videos up in the rankings on YouTube so more people can see them. And also subscribe while you're here. That way you can, of course, get all of these updates so you know when I make a new video. Because to be frank with you, sometimes I don't even know when I'm going to make a new video. But we have 3 series running: the Apostle Paul Antichrist series, the Book of Revelation series, and this series, the original teachings of Yeshua. We have the Sunday NCK live show, and we do have breaking updates like we had this week with Jesus, actually Yeshua between you and me, abducted by a UFO. So great stuff coming to you constantly, great stuff coming to you consistently. So it behooves you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss anything. So what we're going to do now is go right into, I believe this is probably number 4 or 5 of the teachings of Yeshua. So we want you to go ahead and stay up to date on these. The real number of it's down below on the video title. I'm not sure where we are, but here we are in the book of Mark. And the book of Mark is what we're talking about here today. And we just finished talking about the temptation of Yeshua when he was abducted by a UFO and taken into the wilderness and tortured for 40 days by his adversary, his Satan. And when we tell you who that Satan is in the upcoming videos, or you can cheat and go into my YouTube and find out who it is if you look up the real Satan, and you'll find that video. And also unclean beasts that were attacking him. So it was, in my estimation, as we went through the language last time, his great adversary and some spiritual entities that were attacking him, unclean spiritual entities. And then we saw John was put into prison at the very same time. And then Yeshua, they thought they got rid of him because they threw him into the wilderness. And someone said to me, was it the upside down world? Was it another spiritual dimension? Very well could have been. I can't find that in the text, so I can't really bring that to you, but it's certainly something worth exploring. But at any rate, they could not hold Yeshua there. He came back and started preaching the kingdom of God, preaching the gospel. And when we looked last time, we saw the first thing he talked about was the gospel was the forgiveness of sins by water baptism, doing away with blood sacrifice. And of course, what should leap to your mind is, why would a man who did away with blood sacrifice allow himself at some point to become a blood sacrifice? That should make you go, If you have a goatee, you should stroke it. If not, you should just be wondering, what could that possibly be? Now we get into verse number 16 here. And it talks about as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Tiberias as it was called, he saw Simon and Andrew fishing. He said to them, "Come after me, and I'll teach you to be fishers of men." And then they left, and then the other two were taking care of nets, James and John, and Yeshua said, "Hey, come with me." And they had servants, and this passage from 16 through 20 doesn't sit well with me. I believe this is dung. I don't believe this is real, true revelation from the Elohim. I believe this is dung. Why do I believe it's dung? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it talks about catching men like fish. And if you know how a fish is caught, a hook jabbed through their mouth, and then they reel them in, and then they scale them, take off their skin sometimes, and take out their bones and eat them. So the imagery there would be of Jesus, and I believe this is true of the plastic Jesus, who really is the Lord Yahweh Marduk Yaldabaoth, but that's in another video and deeper. But to see that men, Jesus, this plastic Jesus, I can believe, but that Yeshua and his followers would be hooking men through the mouth, the whole fishing imagery, scaling them, eating them, don't like it. Also, when you're talking about putting them in nets, that's catching people, that's depriving people of freedom. And then talk about, it specifically says hired servants right there. And we are none of these, and the true Yeshua was not doing any of that. He wasn't catching people, he wasn't trapping people, and he wasn't making people hired servants. Now, I haven't looked at this, but I'm thinking this is probably going to be slaves. So let's go up, and we're in verse number 20. Let's go up and see if it is slaves rather than just hired servants. I have a feeling that it's probably slaves, but we'll see. And they went hired servants. Let's see what this is. No, it's a hireling. Wow. Now that brings up, see, I didn't even look at this. It's a hireling. Do you know what a hireling is? A hireling is somebody that does what they do for money. And if you think about, it was supposedly Jesus calling his apostles, who were the preachers and teachers and pastors, right? What were they? Hirelings. Ooh, I love it when this happens. Didn't plan it. Didn't study this part of it out. Came to me live. You see it happen. Live revelation. This is, people say, you've read the Bible over 200 times. Why do you keep reading it? You've studied it over 100,000 hours. Why do you keep studying it? For reasons just like that. For reasons just like that. We see a blatant description, a blatant example of not only dung in the Bible, but dung put there not only to deceive us, but dung put there to put us into a mindset of allowing ourselves to be hooked through the mouth like fish, allowing us to be caught in nets like fish or other prey sources, and allow ourselves to fall under hired servants and hirelings. That's what your priest is. I don't care how nice he is. He may not be one of the ones raping children, but he's still a hireling. Your pastor may not be one of the ones stealing money and living high while people are living low, but he's still a hireling. The best of them, even those that you think have your best interests at heart, they really don't, because deep down they know that they're hirelings. They know that what they're preaching and teaching isn't true. And if they don't know, they should know. It only took me about 5 years to figure it out. Now, I was a hireling just like them. It took me 15 after I knew what was going on to get out of that system, because you're paying their bills. You're giving them a place to live. You're giving them almost worship. You're giving them adoration. You're giving them respect. And they have a cushy job. They're hirelings. Wow. See, this is the kind of stuff you figure out and find out about on these broadcasts. That's why you want to stay in the loop. But that's why that whole passage always bothered me. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was true for those reasons that we've seen, textual reasons. And also, if you look at it, what we talk about, where you leave off in 15, is the gospel of the kingdom. Believe the gospel. And it naturally has us saying, well, what is the gospel? And if you take this dung passage out from 16 through 20, it should just be taken out. If you have a Bible, just mark an X through it. Don't mark it through where you can't read it, but just mark an X, because it's not really part of the scriptures. As we've shown you, it's bad doctrine, and it's more than bad doctrine. It's deceptive doctrine, and it's part of putting you in a cage and keeping you there. So from Mark 1:16 through 20, dung as opposed to diamond, and not only because it is what we've seen it to be, but because it just doesn't follow the narrative. So here's Yeshua comes, he's preaching the gospel. Okay, well, what is the gospel? We know that he talked about forgiveness of sin through the shedding of blood. And we'll talk about the whole concept of sin. Remember, this is ABC. Yeshua is teaching people in a sin mentality how to get out of it. Me talking about sin being forgiven by the water baptism doesn't mean that I believe in sin. I had somebody talking to me on emailing me, well, what about these people that say you have to be baptized to get to heaven? See, that whole scenario, you've got to get yourself out of the whole sin, original sin, forgiveness, heaven, hell scenario. And all of our other videos, we talk about that. But this we're doing in chronological order because we're trying to understand what the people understood in the first century when they first read this. So what's the gospel? Well, then if you go right from verse 15 right down to verse 21, they go into Capernaum. It's on the Sabbath day. Yeshua enters and teaches. And people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as a person that had authority. So he's teaching the gospel. And then there was a man in their midst, had an unclean spirit, saying, leave us alone. What have we to do with you? Have you come to destroy us? And then Yeshua rebukes him, saying, hold your peace and come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had torn him, crying with a loud voice, he came out of him. So what's the gospel? Well, one part of the gospel is preaching the forgiveness of sins through water baptism. Another part of the gospel, evidently, according to Yeshua, is what I used to call casting out of demons, but what we will now talk about is the dealing with unclean spirits. And we're running out of time, but let's take a look at what the word unclean means here in verse 24. We just go to interlinear. We go to Matthew 1:24, and we pull down, and it was a unclean spirit. And they spoke out, maybe it's verse 23. Okay, immediately there was one in the synagogue that had an unclean spirit. What does unclean mean? Impure, unclean, unclean, impure. And this is where we start to get to the reality of this. This is what I was looking for. It was mixed. It's a wrong mix. It has a wrong mixture, which really means it's unbalanced. And when we start getting deeper into this, and some of you have listened to some of my other teachings about it, you know where I'm getting to, but whatever you call these spirits, part of the gospel, in addition to preaching the forgiveness of sins through water baptism, part of the gospel is also freeing people from mixed, out of balance, unclean spirits. So when you start looking at and understanding strictly from the scriptures alone what the gospel is, you come up with very different things than what we've been told the gospel of Yeshua is. So far we know strictly from the scriptures and the scriptures alone that the gospel of Yeshua is forgiveness of sin through water baptism and the freeing of people from mixed, impure, unbalanced spiritual entities. And we also know that he had no part of catching people. He had no part of snaring people in nets. He had no part of collecting followers over whom he could appoint hirelings. We've just about destroyed all of Pauline Christianity, and we're not even halfway through the first chapter of the book of Mark. I'm Jeffrey, and why Mark? Because it's the first gospel chronologically of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that was written. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. These are the original teachings of Yeshua in their proper chronological order, and this is the truth. This is the way that you can learn to unindoctrinate yourself.